All right. Welcome everyone to the DemandBlue Project Management Panel for Success webinar. My name is Amy Opplinger and I'm a Customer Success Manager here at DemandBlue. We'll be moderating the conversation today. If you don't know already, DemandBlue provides on-demand services for Salesforce with continuous engagement and on-demand execution. Our model meets your shifting needs to provide the quick and actionable strategies required to execute your Salesforce initiatives to deliver tangible results lightning fast. Please visit our website at www.demandblue.com to learn more about us and connect with us on social at DemandBlue. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand. So with that, let's meet our panelists today. We are joined by Bharati, Brian, and Henry, who are going to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their roles and their experience with project management. Brian, let's hear from you first.
Sure. I'm Brian Fending, CIO at the American Association for Physician Leadership. For 46 years, we've helped physicians learn how to lead healthcare organizations. I come from a software and physical product development background. I've been managing large projects, developing products, and running companies for about 15 years.
Great. Thank you for being on the panel, Brian. Henry, how about you?
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you all are. I'm Henry Stenblatt. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Company Nurse. For 24 years, Company Nurse has been in the business of lessening the pain of workers' comp. Today, we do that with an injury contact center based in Scottsdale, Arizona, where we have approximately 50 agents that are handling about 500 workplace injury calls per day. As far as my background, I've got about 25 years of healthcare IT experience leading technology teams, development teams, infrastructure teams at various companies. And about 15 of those 25 years, I've been working with Salesforce in various methods. So look forward to chatting about it.
Great. Thank you for joining us, Henry. And finally, let's hear from DemandBlue's own Bharati.
Hi, everyone. This is Bharati here. I'm a technical project manager with DemandBlue. I hold 18 years experience in the IT space and completely on the CRM background. And I come from an Oracle background. Actually, I worked with Oracle Siebel and shifted to DemandBlue, getting really excited about the on-demand services we offer. And my Salesforce life is same as my period with DemandBlue.
Great. Well, welcome, panelists. We have a really broad spectrum of experience on our panel, so this should be a really exciting discussion. And let's jump right into our first question. What does project management with Salesforce mean to you? Tell me about your aha moment where you knew you wanted to pursue this methodology in business. Bharati, let's start with you.
Yeah. So coming from Oracle, also with a Siebel background, I found a lot of differences. But the first aha moment was when I was interviewed for the Salesforce CRM specialist role, and I heard about the Salesforce, the ecosystem itself. That kind of excited me, though the platforms and the base structures are the same, but the offerings and the product features of Salesforce that's the most exciting part for me.
Great, thank you. Henry, did you have any aha moments?
I sure did. Similar to Bharati, I came from an Oracle applications background, and being responsible for both developers and infrastructure, my aha moment was realizing with Salesforce that I didn't have to worry as much about the infrastructure, or really at all, given the SaaS focus. And lately, what project management in Salesforce has meant to me is taking advantage of the on-demand service model that DemandBlue brings to the table, which I think is unique as a methodology applied to project management in Salesforce.
Well, thank you for that compliment, Henry. I certainly agree with you. Brian, how about your perspective on this?
Similarly, the ODS or on-demand services model from DemandBlue has been great for us, iterating on initiatives as we have them and being able to flex and expand our team as we need to. Salesforce provides some interesting challenges in implementation and ongoing management. I guess because to look back on my last stretch of time with Salesforce in my organization in 2017, we were implementing and worked with an outside firm to both implement Salesforce and reshape our CRM data model to best leverage it. One of the great realizations is you don't need to do much more than what's out of the box until you really want to develop your business a bit further. We've been actually using Salesforce to help grow the business. And I found that as long as our requirements were sufficient, we can work with the vendor ecosystem really well.
I agree with you. Thank you for that insight. As we all know, the last 15, 18 months have been a bit of a challenge. With the pandemic, what is your perspective on rethinking the risk thresholds and contingency planning for businesses, especially in the Salesforce landscape? Henry, let's hear from you.
Well, this one's very relevant for us. As I mentioned in my intro, for 24 years, we've focused on lessening the pain of workers' comp with our injury contact center. The pandemic caused us to shift our focus and use a very common term lately. We pivoted to a digital engagement strategy for COVID screening. And we were really able to do that because of our ODS model, because of what we'd already invested in Salesforce. We were quickly able to take our Salesforce Sales Cloud configuration and tweak it for a very different type of a sales process. We were able to sign up over 120 organizations. And then by today, we've almost completed 2 million healthcare screening transactions for over 30,000 users. So obviously, the risk threshold for us was we wanted to survive COVID. And so we had to really rethink how quickly, how fast we could make those moves. And we were able to do it because of ODS and because of our investment in Salesforce.
Yeah, Henry, I think that's a brilliant perspective, because a lot of businesses like yourself found that they did have to make this pivot suddenly, right? We were all kind of in the same boat, and it's great to hear that the ODS model was helpful in that, along with the Salesforce structure and the way that you're able to pivot very quickly to respond to business needs. Brian, how was your experience during the last 18 months?
Yeah, our association's members and most of its customers are physicians. So, 2020 or the last 18 months, as you say, was a very interesting and very busy time for us. Similar to Henry's response, it was part of a digital transformation for us that was already started, but definitely accelerated in the early months of the pandemic. Having Salesforce as our back office for a number of these things allowed us to scale. So there's a huge difference between cloning or replicating a business process and actually scaling that. And Salesforce allowed us to do the latter very well. So we always talk about acceptable risk, in terms of projects and in terms of transformations of the business. So, our need was to execute on plans for the business in that scaled effort. And, one of our largest challenges was actually in data quality. And so we've taken steps to engage on that. We don't have those hallway conversations anymore, being a 100% remote workforce. So it became a bit of a challenge just to keep all of those processes very tight and have your single point of maintenance for some points of data. So that coupled with change management over the last 18 months because we have so many initiatives ongoing at any point in time. Those were really the biggest areas of risks for us and part of our response to the growth required by the pandemic.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I think that, we would have all preferred not to go through the pandemic, but I think that now, having gone through that and having to make these very quick pivots and these quick decisions, it's kind of enabled us to maybe be prepared if something like this ever comes down the chute again. Hopefully not. But those were both very good examples of how you were able to pivot very quickly, despite the risks involved with that. So now that we've talked a little bit about your risk thresholds and contingency planning on how that's changed over the last 18 months, what are your best practices that you can recommend for planning schedule compliance? Let's start with Bharati on this one.
Yeah, sure. So getting to know the complete business flow, requirements of our customers, what drives their end users and the technology to make it really faster, that's the key for us from DemandBlue. We align our technical solutions with the customer's needs. And secondly, I would say planning and prioritizing, that's another major key for us, where can we do parallel developments and how can we mitigate impacts. So as a PM, I love challenging work, like controlling the associated risks with my projects and help customers take more informed decisions. So when there are third parties involved, like there are other dependencies, so we from DemandBlue, we flag it early, have frequent checkpoints to update all the stakeholders on the impacts, schedule impacts, or if there are any kind of dependencies. So we do have, from our ODS itself, right? We have daily status reporting with the customer where we give them the information beforehand so that they get to know the risks beforehand. They get to know what decisions are being taken and for what reason. So I think the communication is the key for us.
And I would agree with you. Constant communication, especially now that we're all kind of dispersed, or we have been over the last 18 months, communication is the utmost best practice, I think, is what I heard you say. Brian, how about for you and your organization?
Yeah, I guess there are a few things that we keep in mind in this regard. One is to keep ourselves realistic about our scopes and estimates, including proposed changes that come up during discovery and development. Second would be to force yourself to deliver incrementally and keep that stakeholder buy-in and sign off going over the duration of a project. It's not okay, go off and build a thing and then come back 3 months later with, oh, well, it wasn't quite it. You need to do that. That actually dovetails into the last thing, which is Bharati's larger point, is to over communicate if you must. Ask questions, question reasonings. Empower your staff to do the same as you're dealing with any external vendors, especially. And the importance of constant dialogue with dev teams, vendors, stakeholders. That can't be understated.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of moving parts, and communication is key to keep those all in place and ultimately keep the stakeholders happy, as well as your internal stakeholders, for sure. Henry, how about for you? What is your suggestion for best practices for planning schedule compliance?
So I'll echo some of what Brian and Bharati said, but I'll break it down like this. So for us, it's about strategy, it's about tactics, and it's about communication. How is it about strategy? From my perspective, it's about picking the right technology stack. We like to say that we're a SaaS first, cloud first company. So we're always looking for SaaS products. Salesforce is obviously a big component of our technology stack, but the same can be said about our contact center system, which is also a SaaS application, and it works very, very much hand in glove with Salesforce. So very focused on our strategy around our technology stack. Tactics, the ODS model, daily Scrum stand-up meetings, daily communications on status for outstanding user stories that we're working on, and then finally communication. So obviously that all kind of brings it all together. But being what Brian said, making sure that you're not promising too much to the stakeholders, trying to keep those expectations in check. And then as things change, because either businesses changed or technology challenges have come up, is just making sure that you're communicating how that's affecting the project, how that's affecting the timeline, and maybe some of the features or the scope creep that's coming into it. So those three things, I think, bring it all together.
Definitely. Thank you for that perspective. And what I heard from all three of you was the common thread of communication, communication, communication. And the fact that Salesforce allows you to kind of make those pivots, make these best practices come to life for your stakeholders and keep everyone on the same page with that good communication is really utmost importance. So we've talked a lot about the changes and things of that nature over the last 18 months in particular, but I'm curious, pandemic aside, how does your business bridge the gap between the product roadmaps provided by services and the changing priorities internally of your organization? Brian, can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. We try to watch where Salesforce is going and, evaluate the value of changes or features, as they're announced before they're available. You have to start thinking about these things that the devil's in the details sometimes, things like, Einstein activity capture and features like that. There's some trade-offs, to be made as you adopt that or don't. The staff experience and what that does to the customer experience, were important enough for us to want to adopt that feature. For example, keeping track of where Salesforce is going is certainly part of that challenge. But I think Salesforce in general does a pretty good job of broadcasting the directions in which they're moving, whether that is via the official product roadmap or interactions that we see online with Salesforce. DemandBlue helps us a fair bit in evaluating those breaking or non-breaking changes as they come up as part of the on-demand services. So I don't have to have a staff member assigned to keep an eye on that stuff. I effectively outsource that. So making that part of the weekly operations for us is fairly easy as a result.
I agree with that. Henry, how about for your business?
Very similar to what Brian said. I think there are a couple of tactics at play here. So one, obviously, we feel that choosing DemandBlue and their on-demand service model really works for us because we're not approaching things from the old waterfall perspective, and that helps us stay lockstep with the business. When COVID happened, we were able to pivot very quickly. We rely on our DemandBlue team to be the experts in the room as far as where is Salesforce going, but we also encourage our internal teams to really take advantage of the free training resources that Salesforce has to offer with Trailhead, and especially through the pandemic, where it used to be you had to be in San Francisco at a certain time of the year to take advantage of the Salesforce conference. Now a lot of those resources are available online. So I always encourage my team, all the way up from the leadership team to the folks in the trenches, to familiarize themselves with where Salesforce is going, especially where they're going in our vertical, being insurance and healthcare. And so combination of our internal resources, our dependency and reliance on DemandBlue as the experts in the room, and then making sure that we're iterating in small increments keeps us aligned with the priorities of the business.
And finally, let's hear from Bharati. How do you feel that businesses might be able to bridge these gaps between the product roadmap and the changing priorities of the organization.
So as a service provider, we keep analyzing newer features and what our customer applications, how can they benefit from this? So we need to keep our eyes and ears open to the pain points of the users. So what's needed for the end users rather, or how is our product going to make their lives easier, faster sales or operations? How is it going to help them reach their KPIs? So I think we need to have that constant conversation going on, understand the change in their roadmaps, and realign our goals as well.
And you all brought up some really good points, which kind of lead me into this next question. Salesforce is constantly updating the product roadmap. With these constant releases and advancements, how do you ensure that your staff is upskilling in this changing system? Let's start with Brian.
Sure. I wouldn't have what I call a big budget. I can't maintain a very wide and deep internal bench of expertise, and we've been leveraging DemandBlue to have a deepening of that bench. That said, we have to know what we're talking about and what we're asking for when we engage on initiatives. So I think we've heard Trailhead a couple times in the course of this webinar thus far. And we've used internal staffing models that have a lot of churn to them, and so far, last couple of years with DemandBlue have been very good. And as with any vendor relationship, you got to be watchful of the results. Absolutely have to do that. So far so good in our current state. I have formal development plans for internal staff. A lot of it is Trailhead, where I focus on areas where I'd like them to succeed, and have learning paths for them within Trailhead that come back into their quarterly conversations with me as staff members.
Yeah, I think Trailhead is really kind of the equalizer in the ecosystem over the last few years for everyone that wants to upskill on any particular aspect of Salesforce. It does change so much. Trailhead modules are extremely helpful for kind of getting up to speed and understanding what you need to do. Brian, how about for your organization? How are you ensuring that your staff keeps their skill level up with all of the changes that happen?
I'll let Henry.
I think you meant I think you meant me, but
I'm sorry.
I echo everything that Brian said about Trailhead. It's amazing that Salesforce has created this platform and makes it available to us for free. I can't understate the value that exists there in Trailhead. But in addition to that, one of the things that I think is unique for DemandBlue is you guys also have the concept of an innovation org. And we've actually taken advantage of that now a couple of times, where we can have DemandBlue install basically in a sandbox, innovation sandbox, tools like a new accounting platform, so that our finance team can get in and actually put their hands and eyes on a new system. Something that's not easily available and elsewhere. Oftentimes, if you wanted to take a look at something like a new accounting platform, you're locked into demos and sales calls for maybe weeks or days. This gives us a way to kind of kick the tires on a few different platforms with the help of DemandBlue. So that's something else that teams can take advantage of.
Yeah, and I feel like the Demand Labs option is really helpful for visualizing. I'm a visual person. I need to see what it means to me with my data, and to be able to go in there and kind of play around, have this playground available for you is amazing. I would completely agree with you on that. It's extremely helpful. All right, let's go on to some tips from our panelists. I would love to hear your 3 valuable tips for our audience about how to be successful in Salesforce project management. Bharati, let's hear your 3 tips first, please.
So we've spoken a lot about it today, right? So communication is the first tip that I would give. keep every stakeholder informed of the right positive statuses and more so on anything that is alarming on the system. Bring it up immediately whenever there is an alarming notification that you can see. And I think we need to also utilize our emotional intelligence in getting not only to fixing problems, but to mitigate them real early. And identifying those risks early helps us taking planned risks and also informed decision making. That's my second cue. And thirdly, keep learning. I think we can use Trailhead as well, and also discussing with Salesforce support, whenever we get to any product limitation and how can we expand on newer solutions or ideas that come from our own team. That'll take us a long way. So planning for that competency building and seeing the big picture where we can align our learning with the customer needs, that's my third tip.
Great tips, Bharati. Brian, what are your 3 valuable tips?
First of all, I think you should know your data model inside out, including but not limited to your customizations, especially during implementation. I speak from a place of memory and pain. You can't delegate that knowledge of the data model. Secondly, harkens back to some things we talked about a few minutes ago, contain your scope. You got to break it up and deliver in phases so you can deliver incremental solutions to the business. Because at the end of the day, you're delivering on solutions, not on projects. The business could not care less about your project scope. The solution, though, they'll remember and they carry forward every day after you've delivered it. And I guess, lastly, this is something that I've come into over my career, is to define success as part of starting up your projects. Then you measure to it and you provide it to your stakeholders, especially if you don't like those answers. It's actually very revealing and an opportunity for growth when something doesn't go to plan. And you identify why, whether that's scope creep or insufficient resourcing, or mistakes that happen along the way. It's important to surface those so that you don't wind up reliving nightmares from project to project.
Exactly right. And finally, Henry, let's hear your 3 valuable tips.
So I'm going to take it in a slightly different direction. I think number one, you have to be a visionary. I see that as my role for the organization is I need to be able to communicate both honestly about how difficult it is to get to that final end state, but we need to talk about what Salesforce and having a 360-degree view of your business does or can do for your organization, and always have that be kind of your North Star of, why are we investing in Salesforce? Why are we transforming our business? So that's very important, is that vision element. Second, I would say, is hire DemandBlue. It's really pretty simple. We talk about iterations and agile development and having an expert at the table. DemandBlue ticks off all those boxes and then some for us. And then finally, I would say, is look internally to your business. You will find that you have internal resources that really understand, whether it's your data model or your functional business processes, that are hungry to take on a new capability and are willing to really dive into Trailhead and become Salesforce experts. I think looking internally often is much better than thinking that you're going to hire some genius Salesforce developer and that's all you need internally for your business. It just doesn't work that way. We love that when we work with DemandBlue, we've got 15 different resources that all wear very different hats from a Salesforce skilling perspective. We're able to bring them all to the table by leveraging DemandBlue's ODS model.
So your comment kind of brought a question to my mind, Henry. You have a very different set of valuable tips than Bharati and Brian offered. So as a top project manager, how do you then plan your daily timeline when you're using a team like DemandBlue that has all these different resources for you?
Well, we rely heavily on DemandBlue, so we can leverage our internal team to help with some of the basic blocking and tackling that needs to happen in Salesforce. One example is around dashboards and reports. I'm not saying that we don't rely and haven't relied on DemandBlue for that, but those are the kinds of things that you can, in some cases, strip away from the timeline of your projects if you're really putting the right tools in the hands of the business so that they can generate their own dashboards and their own reports, and that no longer becomes part of what you sort of have to deliver out of the gate. That's just one simple example about how leveraging that business knowledge and somebody that really understands the business to tackle some of those sort of simpler tasks in Salesforce.
I agree. Bharati, what are your inputs on that question? How are you planning your time as a project manager? And that's coming from our internal DemandBlue kind of methods.
Yeah, so first priority would be whatever is business critical production issues or the committed timelines and deliverables for the day we have with our various customers, right? That's done first in the start of our day. And we also set the expectations right with the team. We need to walk the same road together. So only when the team is aligned with the right goals for the day, even if it's just in the morning stand-up calls, right? We set the right expectations so that we deliver by the end of the day. And I think whenever there are dependencies or any kind of consulting support that we need, we flag it in the first half so that we can expect a turnaround positively for the day. And if there are further dependencies, we still have time to catch up. So that it doesn't leave us as a bottleneck for the problem as well. Yeah, and I think from DemandBlue, since we're supporting various customers from different time zones, we also take care of that. Which customer is going to be there early in the morning, like our times, and when do we need to address to their issues first?
Yeah, a lot of adjustment needs to take place, it sounds like, and you're constantly changing, and your plan is flexible, basically, is what I'm hearing you both say. I want to thank all of the panelists for their time today. We are going to move into the Q&A portion. We do have some questions from the audience that I would like to present to the panelists and get your insight on. The first question we have is, if we're looking to hire a top project manager, what is the top skill to keep in mind for candidates? Brian, what do you look for when you're hiring a PM?
Communication skills. Above pretty much everything else, there's there's experience, of course, and wanting to know if they've worked on projects that are similar in scope to what you're wanting them to do. But when it comes down to core bullet points on a resume skills, communication skills are perhaps the most important.
Henry, how about for you? What do you look for in a project manager when you're hiring?
Well, Brian obviously took the number one answer on that one, but I think equally important to communication, which I wholeheartedly agree with, is empathy. So you want to find project managers that can empathize with what is happening to either customers or internal employees, right? What's their day-to-day like, and why do we need to make this change? It often comes down to, well, it's a terrible agent experience, or it's a terrible sales experience, or it's a terrible customer experience. And if you're not able to empathize with how that makes an employee feel or a customer feel, then all the communication skills in the world aren't going to get you past that lack of empathy. We call it's one of our core values. We call it compassion for everyone.
I love that. And I think that with all of the stress that most people suffered over the last 18 months, empathy is a really valued characteristic, that's for sure. Sometimes lacking, but I think that one thing that has come out of this pandemic is that we're all kind of a little bit more empathetic to people's situations and trying to be a little bit more compassionate. I love that's one of your core values. All right, we have another question from the attendees. What are the favorite tools for project management? Bharati, we'll ask you that question. What are some of your favorite tools as a PM?
On project planning, yes, we do have MPPs and similar tools that we use that lets us flag the milestones and the right breakdown structure as well. And I think collaborative tools are very handy for us these days, right? Especially we use Click. There are so many other collaborative tools that we can get to chat with the team immediately, get their statuses, save a lot of time on team meetings or calls, right? So that's my favorite tools.
Yes, the key point that I'm hearing from everyone through all of the questions is communication is really the kind of foundation for everything that we've talked about around having success in project management. It seems like the most needed skill set for sure. Brian, do you have any favorite project management tools?
Yeah, I do. We use Atlassian products, everything but Trello for technical project management and production issue tracking. So Jira Service Management, Confluence, all of our documentation lives in that wiki format. So we have that level of collaboration across our organization. For me personally, I practice GTD, or getting things done methodology, and so every morning I start with my personal list and align that with what's in the queue for the project work for that day.
That's GTD. I have some friends that use that as well, and it keeps them right in line for their week. That is an excellent tool to recommend. So Henry, here's a question from an audience member. What is an immediate red flag for businesses and project management from both a client and a consultant perspective?
I would say obviously scope creep and how you manage that, but I'll throw a little bit into the tooling discussion that we just had, because I think sometimes I've been with organizations that are always striving to find that perfect tool. And I always say it's not about finding the right tool. It's about making the tools that you have work. And so for our development team that we have in Bulgaria, we use Target Process. It works very well because we all rely on it, and they love it. We love it. For our DemandBlue ODS model, we use the Atlassian tools, Jira, and that works very well because you guys have integrated it so well into what you do. And for our leadership team, we follow the Rockefeller methods, and we use a tool called Align Today. And in each of those cases, they all work because they're right for the team. And that's, I think, ultimately what matters. But all of these tools, really, the important thing is when you walk into a project and there's no agreement on the scope or what the target or what the end goal is, that's a huge red flag.
Exactly. Brian, how about for you and your organization? What do you feel are immediate red flags?
Like many things, under itemized estimates, under specified status updates, on the consultant side, those are the big red flags for me, is not being able to speak to particulars of, why a certain line item is what it is in any initiative or project scope. I think, similar to Henry, if you have any team members who don't know the big picture and what they're working on today, that's a huge red flag for me, because we have all these systems in place in order to serve us, and if they're falling down for whatever reason, whether it's an individual inside an organization or some system that's failing, you need to remedy that as quickly as possible.
I agree. All right, we have one other Q&A question, or nope, we have more than one. Let's see. What methodology do you use for project management? Is a question from one of our attendees. So we'll ask Bharati that question. What methodology do you use for project management?
Oh, Agile is our run. We call it a super Agile here, right? Because normally Agile, we just have these one project planned with sprints that could overlap or give us some timeline. But we do cater to a lot of customers at the same time, so we're running like super Agile. Yeah, that's our methodology.
What does super Agile mean if someone in the audience doesn't know what super Agile means?
So just like how we have regular agile projects, right? For one particular project, we split it out into different sprints, and it's gonna work for a particular customer. So you could have like multiple customer projects happening at the same time with similar teams, and you get to rightly manage your team skill sets and align them to the right sprint and deliver at multiple projects at the same time.
Great. Henry, do you all subscribe to a particular methodology for project management?
We do. We follow Agile, obviously, and one of the reasons we picked DemandBlue was because we wanted to follow an Agile methodology. Sometimes we tried to get pulled away from that, but we're pretty obsessed with. I don't know that we call it super agile, but it's, let's say we'll call it little a agile in our own way. Obviously with DemandBlue, it's one version or one flavor of it with our development team, and we have another development team offshore where we use target process. It's more of a Kanban board approach, but similar. We do weekly sprints. Actually, the pandemic caused us to go from 2 or 3 week sprints all the way down to weekly sprints, and we've been able to maintain that. We've also moved to a continuous delivery model where we're able to release software without interrupting any of our users for the most part. And we've moved from software release once a month to releasing software a couple times a week.
So that's very interesting change and really kind of scaled up. How do your users react to that? You said it doesn't really affect them, but how is that communicated to them? Because change management is often very tricky in organizations. Did you run into any roadblocks with that?
We do, obviously. It was one thing when we were doing it once a month. Everybody knew, hey, our release is coming, and here are the things that are in the release. It comes down to communication. So we have weekly meetings internally when we're very clear about what's getting released, and then there's better communication coming from our development team as to what's in the release versus not in the release. Sometimes, depending on the type of functionality that's being added, there could be a little bit more fallout in terms of getting users retrained. But for the most part, I think our team is now fully bought into the fact that this is a continuously evolving, continuously improving, usually, process.
That's fantastic. Brian, what methodology do you use for project management?
I wish it were one, but we use a mixed bag of different Agile methodologies. I use several managed service providers across the enterprise. So, forcing them all into a single one is like herding cats. I need to adapt to the need based on the team that I've got. Lowercase a Agile, I'm going to adopt that one, Henry. That's a really good way to describe sort of the light Agile processes, without getting into a lot of the jargony terminology that can follow. But in general, we deliver in small increments. And if we have a large initiative, say, something that's going to take a long time to come to fruition, we're delivering that, but in a staging environment specific to that initiative that, takes some maintenance to keep those things current and keep everyone on that same page. But, as a portfolio, we use several different kinds, but the most successful of them, since I check in daily and weekly on everything, the most successful of them are agilely managed.
Well, I think that even if you think it's a combination or a little a Agile, which I also love, the underlying premise of Agile is that it's very responsive. So the fact that you're able to handle all these vendors, all these managed service providers in a different fashion, in a responsive way, is really at the core Agile, right? So that was very interesting to learn. I have a few more questions from the audience. One is, do you recommend any learning or certification for project managers? Brian, do you have any input on that?
Yeah, insofar as certifications go, I'm more concerned with someone's breadth of knowledge. I don't look at a certification and say, oh yeah, they know everything on that subject. I like to see like things that they have done that reflect that. So I look at a portfolio of work that they've prepared, or their trailheads. Frankly, being aggressive in going through Trailhead and completing trails. That tells me something about them as lifelong learners, more so than do a certification, prepare for a test, and take it. That's maybe not the most popular outlook to have on certification for Salesforce, but honestly, I would prefer someone with a lot of Trailhead progress that is a lifelong learner than someone who has a one-off certificate.
Well, I think I agree with you on that, in that Trailhead, someone that's very active in Trailhead is showing that they're interested. It's self-motivated. It's not just, hey, I'm going to get this piece of paper that I can put on my resume at the end and while I'm cramming for this test. So I agree with you on the Trailhead 100%. Henry, is there any kind of certification or skill set that you look for around project managers?
This has been a moving target. 20 years ago, I would have said PMP certified, project manager, waterfall projects using Microsoft Project. That was really important. Today, I lean more towards where Brian went with this, where it's really about the business knowledge that the person brings to the table. Or in the case of Agile, if I was to be building an Agile team, I might look for somebody that's certified as a Scrum Master. I might look for somebody that really understands the tool that we've decided we're going to use, whether that's Jira or Rally or Salesforce has a Agile add-on. It doesn't matter in the tool. I just want to make sure that the person that's going to be responsible for project management in Salesforce really knows the business and really knows the tool that they're going to be using. That's going to be a better indicator of success than whether they have some, certification that's probably already out of date and nobody cares about.
Yeah, that's a fantastic kind of attitude to have, I think. All right, I have one final Q&A question for the panel, and I'm going to get answers from all of you on this one, so think about it. What makes project management? The project, the plan, the team? You tell me what your thoughts are on this. Henry, we'll start with you this time.
It's a combination of the three, but I would say the team. If you have the right team, you will communicate. You will change the plan as the plan needs to be changed, and you'll make it work.
The team is the dream, right? All right, Brian, how about for you? The project, the plan, the team. What makes project management?
Well, I couldn't agree more with Henry that it's primarily the team, but it's also having a realistic and executable plan. And really, the two play together, right, in the course of a project. So, you have these constituent components and, maturity phases, for whatever project or portfolio of projects you have, but managing all of those successfully across a time dimension makes the result, and that is ultimately coming from the team, as Henry had said.
I agree. The team that is working together, great, but without a plan might not deliver anything of meaning. So I understand completely what you're saying on that. We're going to end up on Bharati's perspective on this. Bharati, what do you feel makes project management?
Yeah, mine is not going to be very different from the both of them. Of course, the team is what makes the project management successful, right? So the project it does hold the objective and the purpose for which we are delivering the project. And of course, the plan does help us achieve it right in time. There may be changes coming along the way, but the way that it runs and becomes successful is only with the right team.
Great answers from all three of you. I couldn't agree more. Well, I want to take this moment as we close to thank Brian, Henry, and Bharati for joining the panel and for giving us your perspective on what makes a successful project management. I love all of the ideas, and one of the overarching themes that we heard today was really communication is key. I hope for the attendees that you gathered some great tidbits of knowledge from these experts and go on to manage your project successfully, whether it be on Salesforce or any other platform. So we'd like to thank you for joining our DemandBlue webinar. Again, there will be an on-demand recording of this webinar that you can utilize on the slide, the information on the slide presented, and get your own recording and hopefully share it with other people that might be interested in this topic. Thank you, everyone.